We are going to read from Deuteronomy chapters 17 and 18 today. We're going to read out of the Message version, so it might sound a little bit different. Again, remember, Moses is talking to his people and getting ready to go into the Promised Land. If you find anyone within the towns that God, your God, is giving you doing what is wrong in God's eyes, breaking his covenant by going off to worship other gods, bowing down to them, the sun, say, or the moon, or any rebel sky gods, look at the evidence and investigate carefully. If you find that it is true that in fact an abomination has been committed in Israel, then you are to take the man or woman who did this evil thing outside your city gates and stone the man or woman, hurl stones at the person until dead. But only on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses may a person be put to death. No one may be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The witnesses must throw the first stones in the execution. Then the rest of the community joins in. You have to purge the evil from your community. When matters of justice come up that are too much for you, hard cases regarding homicides, legal disputes, fights, take them up to the central place of worship that God, your God, has designated. Bring them to the Levitical priests and the judge who is in office at the time. Consult them, and they will hand down the decision for you. Then carry out their verdict at the place designated by God your God. Do what they tell you, in exactly the way they tell you. Follow their instructions precisely. Don't leave out anything. Don't add anything. Anyone who presumes to override or twist a decision handed down by the priest or judge who was acting in the presence of God, your God, is as good as dead. Root him out. Rid Israel of the evil. Everyone will take notice and be impressed. That will be an end to the presumptuous behavior. When you enter the land that God, your God, is giving you, take it over and settle down and say, I'm going to get me, I'm going to get me a king like all the nations around me. Make sure you get yourself a king whom God your God chooses. Choose your king from among your kinsmen. Don't take a foreigner or only a kinsman. And make sure he doesn't build up a war machine, amassing military horses and chariots. You must not send people to Egypt to get more horses, because God told you, never go back there again. And make sure he doesn't build up a harem, collecting wives who will divert him from the straight and narrow. And make sure he doesn't pile up a lot of silver or gold. This is what must be done. When he sits down on the throne of his kingdom, the first thing he must do is make himself a copy of this revelation on a scroll copied under the supervision of the Levitical priests. That scroll is to remain at his side at all times. He is to study it every day so that he may learn what it means to fear his God. Living in reverent obedience before these rules and regulations by following them, he must not become proud and arrogant, changing the commands at whim to suit himself or making up his own versions. If he reads and learns, he will have a long reign as king in Israel, he and his sons. The Levitical priests, that's the entire tribe of Levi, don't get any land inheritance with the rest of Israel. They get the fire gift offerings of God. They will live on that inheritance, but they don't get land inheritance because, like the rest of their kinsmen, God is their inheritance. This is what the priests get when the people from any offering of an ox or a sheep, the shoulder, the 2 cheeks, and the stomach. You must also give them the first fruits of your grain, wine, and oil, and the first fleece of your sheep, because God your God has chosen only them and their children out of all your tribes to present and serve always in the name of God your God. If a Levite moves from any town in Israel, he is quite free to move wherever he desires, and comes to the place God designates for worship. He may serve there in the name of God, along with his brother Levites who are present and serving in the presence of God. And he will get an equal share to eat, even though he has money from the sale of his parents' possessions. When you enter the land that God your God is giving you, don't take on the abominable ways of life of the nations there. Don't you dare sacrifice your son or daughter in the fire. Don't practice divination, sorcery, fortune telling, witchery, casting spells, holding seances, or channeling with the dead. People who do these things are an abomination to God. It's because of just such abominable practices that God your God is driving these nations out before you. Be completely loyal to God your God. These nations that you're about to run out of the country consort with sorcerers and witches, but not you. God your God forbids it. God your God is going to raise up a prophet for you. God will raise him up from among your kinsmen, a prophet like me. Listen obedient to him. This is what you asked God, your God, for at Horeb on the day that you were all gathered at the mountain and said, we can't hear any more from God, our God. We can't stand seeing any more fire. We'll die. And God said to me, they're right. They've spoken the truth. I'll rise up for them a prophet like you from their kinsmen. I'll tell him what to say, and he will pass on to them everything I commanded him. And anyone who won't listen to my words spoken by him, I will personally hold responsible. But any prophet who fakes it, who claims to speak in my name, something I haven't commanded him to say, or speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet must die. You may be wondering among yourselves, how can we tell the difference whether it was God who spoke or not? Well, here's how. If what the prophet spoke in God's name doesn't happen, then obviously God wasn't behind it, and the prophet made it up. Forget about him. And so there's the last two chapters, 17 and 18. And the one thing that to pay attention to in chapter 17 was how God wanted Moses to write those rolls down for the king, Saul is going to be the first king in Israel. And he's supposed to be reading that every day. This is a reminder to stay humble. And that's a good reminder for us to always be in God's word every single day and to stay humble and to listen to God's leading and where he wants us to go. I hope you have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.